We were celebrating a bar mitzvah in our community, and as it often happens, there were people there who have never been in a synagogue in their lives before. A middle-aged, seems like well-educated couple was sitting near a young yeshiva student who was helping us with the event. They started asking him about the rituals that they saw. The boy was answering their questions and periodically glancing at me looking for approval. I nodded and I smiled because he was answering actually very well. After that, the couple told him with a philosophical tone of voice, "Thank you for the information. We obviously don't believe in any of this. We are educated secular people, but it was interesting to hear what you have to say." The young student cringed and glanced at me again, this time at a loss. The couple took his reaction for granted. In certain secular circles, they are so confident in the superiority of their secular worldview that it is expected that people of faith should recognize this superiority as well. I felt that I needed to stand up for my young assistant. "You know," I told them, "I have long wanted to talk to an educated secular person. Could you please tell me which of the secular worldviews do you follow?" They looked at me in a bewilderment. "Just secular, that's it?" Well, if a person calls himself religious, then he can explain what religious views he holds. There are many of them. If a person calls himself secular, he probably also follows one of many different secular schools of thought. For example, do you believe, like a secular philosopher, Francis Hutchinson, in absolute moral values? Or, as a secular philosopher, John Mackey, that all moral values are subjective? Or maybe, as a secular philosopher, Richard Joyce, that moral values don't exist? Do you believe, as a secular philosopher, Immanuel Kant, in the existence of a soul? Or, as a secular philosopher, Schopenhauer, or secular philosopher Hume, that there's no such a thing as soul? Do you think, as a secular philosopher Nietzsche, that people should not be forgiven? Or, as a secular philosopher Adam Smith, that forgiveness is a great virtue? The husband began answering my questions, but he was interrupted by his wife, who clearly saw contradictions in what he was saying. They got into somewhat of an argument, and it became obvious that they are discussing these issues for the first time, maybe in their lives. And so, adults who call themselves educated secular people appear to have no idea about the fundamental issues of life. And they are laughing at the yeshiva student who has devoted endless hours to studying these very subjects. He is younger than their children, but he has a thought-through, consistent position that he can explain. As you can imagine, if someone is trying to answer these questions on the fly, he has no chance of being consistent in his worldview. Hundreds of secular thinkers have spent decades contemplating their beliefs in an attempt to create a consistent theory, and not always they were successful. A person who calls himself secular can certainly live according to one of these ideologies, but no one does that. But if a person has his own worldview an ideology that he created himself, and he has not spent his life studying these issues, then he probably considers himself smarter than Kant and Nietzsche. They spend their lives thinking about these topics. And this guy, just like that, on the fly, came up with something better than them. I often talk with people who do not believe, like I do, that the Torah was given to us by God. But even if we put God aside for a second, we can probably agree that unlike the modern secular person, those who live according to the Torah rely on an ideology that has been carefully thought through by the greatest minds for thousands of years. Their debates left not a single gap in their logic. You might not like their conclusions, but at least all of their positions are thought through and consistent. I'm often complimented for being smart and having wise thoughts. I love compliments, but I'm sorry, I cannot take any credit for any of these ideas. I did not come up with any of them myself. I just read books that were written centuries before I was born. And I suggest you do the same.